At Thanksgiving, my son-in-law, full of audacity, called me worthless garbage in front of the whole family, thinking he would get away with it. But the next day he received 3 messages from me, my lawyer, and the bank. These words, which were supposed to destroy me, turned against him, changing his life forever. Betrayal in the family awakened justice that no one expected. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. Dad, you can't just cut us off like this. Kayla's voice cracked across the dining room, her fork clattering against the china plate. The carved turkey sat half-finished before me, its golden skin now cold and forgotten. Scott leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass with deliberate arrogance. Leonard, we had an agreement. $3,000 a month. Kayla's been counting on that money. I set down my carving knife slowly, deliberately. The other family members around the table shifted uncomfortably. Martha, my sister, exchanged a worried glance with her husband, Paul. Scott's brother James stopped mid-chew, his wife Christina reaching for her water glass with trembling fingers. We had no agreement, I said quietly. I helped because I wanted to help. Help? Scott's laugh was sharp, bitter. You call abandoning your daughter? Help? She's struggling because of you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Kayla's tears started fresh, mascara tracing dark lines down her cheeks. She looked between her husband and me, trapped in a war she never wanted. I raised 5 kids after your mother died, I continued, my voice steady despite the heat building in my chest. Put them all through college, bought this house so the family would always have a place to gather. Ancient history, Scott interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. What matters is now. What matters is that your daughter needs support, and you're too selfish to provide it. The dining room fell silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Paul cleared his throat nervously. James pushed food around his plate, avoiding eye contact. Selfish? The word tasted foreign in my mouth. Scott stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. The wine had made him bold, reckless. His face flushed red as he pointed a finger at me across the mahogany table my wife had picked out 30 years ago. Yes, selfish. You sit in this big house, hoarding your money while your own daughter struggles to pay her mortgage, while she works double shifts just to keep food on the table. I felt my jaw tighten. Kayla works part-time at a boutique. That's not the point. Scott slammed his wine glass down so hard the stem cracked. Dark liquid seeped across the white tablecloth. The point is, family takes care of family. But you? He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You're worthless trash. My wife deserved a better father. The room exploded into gasps. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Christina knocked over her water glass, sending ice cubes skittering across the table. James finally looked up, his eyes wide with shock. But I felt something else entirely. Something cold and calculating settling into my bones like winter frost. The fury I expected never came. Instead, a strange calm washed over me, bringing with it a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I stood slowly, my napkin falling to the floor, every eye in the room fixed on me, waiting for the explosion that never came. Scott stepped back, perhaps realizing he'd crossed a line from which there was no return. Dinner's over, I said simply. The words carried a finality that made everyone flinch. Kayla started to speak, but I held up my hand. Not rudely, just decisively. The gesture of a man who had made a choice. I walked toward my study, hearing chairs scraping and whispered conversations erupting behind me. At the doorway, I paused without turning around. James, please help your family gather their things. Behind me, Scott was already arguing with Kayla in harsh whispers. Something about standing his ground, about not letting an old man push him around, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. It sounded hollow now, desperate. I closed the study door behind me and moved to my desk. Through the window, I could see my neighbor's house, warm light spilling from their windows where another family was probably sharing pie and football, blissfully unaware that lives were being irrevocably changed just next door. My fingers found the brass handle of my desk drawer, the one where I kept my financial records. 3 months of withdrawn support, $850,000 in savings. 45 years of business experience. Scott Martin had just made the biggest mistake of his life. 2 hours later, I turned off the dining room lights. The broken wine glass had left a permanent stain on Maria's favorite tablecloth. I'd wrapped the leftover turkey and stored the dishes, moving through my house with mechanical precision. My study felt smaller tonight. The mahogany desk, usually my sanctuary, seemed burdened with the weight of Scott's words. Worthless trash. I pulled out my chair and sat down heavily, staring at the photograph of Maria that had watched over my work for 12 years. I kept my promise, I whispered to her smiling face. The desk drawer slid open with a familiar creak. Inside, 12 years of financial records lay organized in manila folders, each year carefully labeled in my precise handwriting. December 2012. Through November 2024, the story of my sacrifice documented in bank statements and canceled checks. I pulled out my calculator, the same Texas Instruments model I'd used for business deals decades ago. The numbers told a stark truth. $3,000 every month for 12 years. My fingers moved across the keys with practiced ease. 36 months per year, 144 months total. $432,000 in base payments alone. But that wasn't everything. The red folder contained the extras. $8,000 when Scott's Honda needed a new transmission. $12,000 for Kayla's surgery when their insurance fell short. $5,000 for the down payment on their current house. $4,000 for Scott's certification program that never led to the promotion he promised. Each receipt told the same story. Just this once, Leonard. We'll pay you back. This is the last time we'll need help. The lies accumulated like dust on forgotten furniture. I opened the folder marked Conversations. My habit of documenting important family discussions had served me well in business. Maria had taught me that memory was unreliable, but written records never lied. December 15th, 2012. Kayla's voice breaking through tears. Dad, Scott's really trying to find steady work. If you could just help with rent until he gets established. March 3rd, 2015. Scott's confident voice. Leonard, this promotion is practically guaranteed. 6 months tops and we'll be independent. August 12th, 2018. Kayla, again. We know we said 6 months, but the housing market is crazy right now. Scott's working on something big at his company. October 4th, 2021. Scott's irritated tone. Look, we appreciate the help, but we're adults. We don't need lectures about budgeting. The entries continued, each one a small betrayal wrapped in family obligation. Promises broken, deadlines ignored, gratitude gradually replaced by entitlement. I closed my eyes and returned to that December morning when Maria's breathing grew shallow. She'd gripped my hand with surprising strength for someone so frail. Promise me you'll take care of our girl, she'd whispered. Kayla's going to need guidance. She's too trusting, too generous with her heart. I'd promised immediately, without question. How could I do otherwise? But Maria never said anything about taking care of Scott. The calculator's display glowed in the lamplight. $487 to $350, nearly $500,000. More than most people earned in a decade, more than I'd ever spent on anything except this house. I leaned back in my leather chair, the one Maria had surprised me with for my 50th birthday. The same chair where I'd built my construction business from a small loan into something that employed 37 people, where I'd negotiated contracts worth millions, where I'd learned that successful men don't get angry. They get strategic. Scott had called me worthless trash in front of my family, in my own house, at my own table. He'd forgotten that trash was something you threw away. But worthless, that remained to be determined. I reached for my phone, scrolling through contacts I hadn't called in months. Business associates, legal professionals, people who understood that every problem had a solution if you knew the right approach. Tomorrow would be a very different kind of day. Dawn crept through my study windows as I pushed aside the financial records. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but sleep seemed impossible. The house felt different now, charged with purpose instead of emptiness. I pulled open the file cabinet's bottom drawer, the one I rarely touched anymore. Legal documents from my business years lay organized in hanging folders. Property deeds, contract templates, partnership agreements. And there, in the folder marked Family Legal, I found what I was looking for, the mortgage papers from 2016. Scott's signature sprawled across the bottom of page 12, confident and careless. But above it, in the guarantor section, my own name appeared in careful block letters. I remembered that day clearly. Kayla had begged me to co-sign because Scott's credit wasn't quite good enough for their dream house. Just as a backup, Dad. We'll never need you to actually pay anything. 8 years later, I realized what Scott had forgotten, what perhaps he'd never understood. I didn't just guarantee their mortgage. I owned 30% of their house. My business experience kicked in like muscle memory. Property law was simple when you understood the fundamentals. As a guarantor with ownership stake, I had legal standing to demand immediate debt resolution. I could force a sale. I could call the loan. Scott had no idea. I reached for my address book, the leather-bound volume that had survived 3 decades of business deals. Richard Palmer's card was right where I'd left it, tucked between the pages. My lawyer for 15 years, the man who'd handled my company's contracts and helped me navigate Maria's estate. At exactly 7 o'clock, I dialed his direct number, Richard Palmer speaking. Richard, it's Leonard Green. I need your legal expertise on a family matter. Leonard? His voice warmed immediately. How are you holding up? I know the holidays can be difficult since Maria. I'm well, but I have a situation involving my daughter's mortgage that requires immediate attention. The line went quiet for a moment. Richard shifted into professional mode. What kind of situation? I co-signed and hold ownership stake in a property. The primary borrowers have become financially irresponsible and publicly disrespectful. I want to understand my legal options. Ah, Richard's tone became carefully neutral. When can you come in? This sounds like something we should discuss in person. This morning, if possible. Give me an hour to review property law precedents. Can you be here by 9? I glanced at my watch. 2 hours to shower, dress, and organize my documentation. I'll be there. Bring all the original paperwork, mortgage documents, any payment records, correspondence about the loan. Already gathered. Leonard? Richard's voice carried a note of concern. Are you certain this is the path you want to pursue? Family legal matters can become complicated. I looked at Maria's photograph, then at the pile of financial records documenting 12 years of one-sided generosity. Richard, yesterday my son-in-law called me worthless trash in front of my entire family, in my own home, at my own table. The silence stretched for several seconds. I'll see you at 9, Richard said quietly. After I hung up, I sat in my chair for a long moment, watching Spokane wake up outside my window. Early commuters headed to jobs where they worked for people who respected them. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that revenge was being carefully planned just blocks away. I stood up and walked toward my bedroom to get dressed. Today would require my best suit. The elevator chimed softly as I reached the 12th floor of the Paulson Center. Richard Palmer's law office occupied the corner suite, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a commanding view of downtown Spokane. I'd been here dozens of times over the years, but today felt different. Today I wasn't here as a businessman seeking contract advice. Richard greeted me at his office door, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. We'd known each other long enough that handshakes felt unnecessary. Leonard, you look... He paused, studying my face. Determined. I am. His conference room smelled of leather and old law books. I spread my documents across the mahogany table with practiced efficiency. Mortgage papers, property deeds, guarantor agreements, 12 years of payment records. Richard picked up the mortgage document first, his experienced eyes scanning the legal language. 2016. You co-signed for their house on Miller Avenue. 30% ownership stake. I remember the banker explaining my rights, but I never paid attention to the details. Because you never intended to exercise them. Richard's finger traced the guarantor clause. But legally, you have significant power here. As co-owner and guarantor, you can demand immediate payment of any outstanding debts secured by the property. The words sent a cold satisfaction through my chest. What kind of debts? Mortgage balance, home equity loans, any credit accounts using the property as collateral. He looked up from the documents. Have you checked their current financial status? That's my next stop. Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from professional to concerned. Leonard, I've known you since Maria was alive, This isn't like you. Yesterday wasn't like me either, but Scott made it clear how he views our relationship. What exactly did he say? I met his gaze steadily. He called me worthless trash, in front of my family, in my own home. Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I see. And you want to respond through legal channels? I want to respond appropriately. At 1:30 that afternoon, I sat across from Margaret Wells in the Customer Relations Office of First National Bank. Margaret had managed commercial accounts for 15 years, and she recognized my name immediately when I called. Mr. Green, I see you're listed as co-owner on the Miller Avenue property. How can I assist you today? I slid the property documents across her desk. I need to review the financial status of all accounts associated with this address. Margaret's fingers clicked across her keyboard with professional efficiency. Her expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight widening of her eyes as the information populated her screen. The primary account holder is Scott Martin. Current mortgage balance is $218,000. Home equity loan balance is $47,000. She paused, scrolling down. There are also 3 credit accounts using the property as collateral. What's the total credit card debt? $34,000 across multiple accounts. The payment history shows... Another pause as she reviewed the data. Consistent late payments over the past 18 months. 2 accounts are currently in default status. I felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Scott's arrogance had been funded by debt he couldn't manage. His comfortable lifestyle built on borrowed money he couldn't repay. As co-owner, what are my options regarding these debts? Margaret chose her words carefully. You have the legal right to demand payment resolution. If the primary borrower cannot satisfy the obligations, you can initiate foreclosure proceedings or force a property sale. Timeline: 30 days written notice to the borrower. If no resolution occurs, legal proceedings can begin immediately thereafter. I thanked Margaret and gathered my documents. The drive home felt different than the morning trip downtown. My briefcase now contained not just old papers, but weapons. Legal ammunition that Scott had unknowingly provided. The sun was setting as I pulled into my driveway. Tomorrow was Friday. That gave me the weekend to prepare the next phase. Scott had called me worthless trash on Thursday. By the following Friday, he would understand exactly how much his family's security was worth. That Friday evening, I cleared my entire desk and started over. Every document had its place now. Property deeds in one stack, financial records in another, legal precedents in a third. My study transformed from a simple office into something resembling a war room. I made 3 lists on yellow legal paper. What I knew, what I suspected, what I needed to prove. The suspected list was longest. Scott's lifestyle never quite matched his salary, even with my monthly support. The expensive dinners, the newest phone model, the weekend trips that Kayla mentioned casually. I'd assumed he was simply bad with money. But what if it was worse than irresponsibility? Saturday morning, I called Richard Palmer at home. I need a recommendation for a private investigator, someone discreet. May I ask what kind of investigation? Financial background, gambling activities, hidden debts. Richard paused. James Connor, a former detective, now private. I'll text you his number. The Spokane Investigative Services office occupied a modest suite in a converted downtown warehouse. James Connor was younger than I expected, maybe 52, with the careful eyes of someone who'd seen too much human nature. Mr. Palmer explained your situation. You suspect financial impropriety by a family member? I slid the basic information across his desk. My son-in-law. I need to know everything about his financial activities over the past 18 months. Gambling specifically? Among other things. James quoted his fees and timeline. 48 hours for a comprehensive report. Everything legal and admissible. Sunday morning, James called, before I finished my coffee. You need to see this in person. His report covered 11 pages. Scott's online poker activities dated back 22 months. Sports betting, casino games, daily sessions averaging 2 to 4 hours. The numbers made my stomach turn. $28,000 in gambling losses over 18 months, James explained, pointing to a spreadsheet. Hidden bank account your daughter doesn't know about. 3 secret credit cards. He's been diverting approximately 40% of his salary. The timing? Gambling increased dramatically after your monthly payment stopped. He's been using credit to maintain the lifestyle your support previously funded. I studied the transaction patterns. Scott wasn't just irresponsible with money, he was addicted to losing it. There's more, James continued. 2 payday loans, both overdue. A personal loan from his brother James that he hasn't mentioned to your daughter. Total hidden debt approaches $55,000. The room felt colder. Scott hadn't just insulted me. He'd been systematically deceiving Kayla while living off my generosity. One more thing. James pulled out a final document. I found evidence he's been researching bankruptcy law. Downloaded several guides, visited attorney websites. He's planning to default on everything. That evening, I sat in my study with all the evidence spread before me. Scott's financial life lay completely exposed. His gambling addiction, his deception of Kayla, his complete dependency on credit and other people's money. He'd called me worthless trash while secretly planning to destroy my daughter's financial future. I opened my laptop and began typing. 3 documents. 3 messages that would arrive Monday morning at precisely calculated intervals. Each one would strip away another layer of Scott's false security until he understood exactly how powerless he really was. The first message would go to Scott at 9 a.m., the second to the bank at 11. The third would wait until Scott came crawling to me, begging for mercy he'd never shown. 8 o'clock Monday morning, I sat at my desk with coffee cooling beside 3 printed documents. The first was personal. The others were business. I picked up my phone and typed carefully. Don't contact trash again. Check your mail. Send. The message showed as delivered immediately. Scott would read those words and remember exactly what he'd called me 5 days ago. At 8:15, my phone rang. Richard, execute the eviction notice. Already prepared. Certified mail goes out this morning. Email copy sent now. I opened my laptop and forwarded Richard's email to myself, then printed the legal notice. 30 days to vacate. Property co-owner rights clearly stated. Official law firm, letterhead. Everything Scott had never bothered to understand about his own mortgage. At 8:30, I dialed Margaret Wells. Margaret, I'm requesting immediate debt acceleration on the Miller Avenue property. Of course, Mr. Green. As co-owner, you have that authority. We'll send demand letters for all outstanding balances today. Include the timeline, 10 days for full payment. $34,000 plus interest. I'll have the documents prepared within the hour. 3 strikes, personal, legal, financial. Scott would spend his morning discovering that his comfortable life had been built on sand and the tide was coming in. I returned to my coffee and waited. The phone rang at 11:07. Kayla's name appeared on the caller ID. Her voice was barely recognizable through the sobbing. Dad, what's happening? Scott got these papers this morning and he's completely losing his mind. There's something about eviction and the bank is calling about immediate payment and I don't understand what's going on. What did Scott tell you? He won't tell me anything. He just keeps saying it's impossible, that you can't do this, that there has to be a mistake. Her voice cracked. Dad, please, what's happening? Do you remember Thanksgiving dinner, Kayla? What does that have to do with anything? Your husband called me worthless trash in front of our entire family. Silence stretched across the line. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. Dad, I know Scott was wrong to say that, but these legal papers, you can't just throw us out of our house. Actually, I can. I own 30% of your house. I guaranteed your mortgage when Scott's credit wasn't good enough, something he apparently forgot to mention when he decided to insult me. You own part of our house? Read the mortgage papers, Kayla. My name is right there next to his. The crying intensified. But Dad, we live here. Emma goes to school here. We can't just leave. You should have thought about that before your husband decided I was worthless trash. Please, the word came out broken. Please don't do this. Scott's sorry. He's really sorry. I looked at Maria's photograph on my desk. She'd taught me that actions had consequences, that respect was earned and lost through choices. Tell Scott that worthless trash just cut off his financial life support. I hung up and set the phone aside. Through my window, December rain streaked the glass like tears. Somewhere across town, Scott Martin was discovering that insulting the wrong person could cost everything. My coffee had gone cold, but I felt warmer than I had in years. Tuesday morning brought the first collapse. Kayla called at 9:15, her voice raw from crying. "Dad, Scott lost his job yesterday. He couldn't focus after those legal papers came. He made 3 major mistakes on a client project, and they let him go." I sip my fresh coffee and watch sparrows gather outside my kitchen window. How unfortunate? How unfortunate? Her voice cracked with disbelief. "Dad, he's been with that company for 6 years. We depend on his salary. How can you just sit there and—" "Your husband made his choice at Thanksgiving dinner, Kayla." The line went quiet except for her ragged breathing. "Please," she whispered. "Please call Mr. Palmer and tell him this was a mistake. Tell the bank to unfreeze our credit cards. We can work this out." "I'm afraid that's not possible." I hung up and returned to my newspaper. The stock market was performing well. My portfolio had gained 2% this quarter. Wednesday brought deeper consequences. Margaret Wells called to confirm the account. Freeze was complete. All credit access suspended pending debt resolution, she reported with professional efficiency. Mr. Martin attempted to withdraw cash yesterday but was denied. He's requested 3 separate meetings with management. His timeline remains 10 days? Correct. December 12th for full payment of $34,000 plus accumulated interest. Kayla called again that afternoon, more frantic than before. "Dad, they froze everything. Our checking account, savings, credit cards. I couldn't buy groceries today." Emma asked why I was crying at the store. My granddaughter, 8 years old, brown curls like her grandmother Maria. She didn't deserve this chaos, but Scott should have considered his family before insulting mine. These are standard banking procedures when co-owners request debt acceleration. Co-owner? Kayla's voice rose to nearly a shriek. "You keep saying that like it means something. It means I own 30% of your house, Kayla. It means I guaranteed your mortgage when your husband's credit wasn't sufficient. It means I have legal authority to demand immediate debt satisfaction. You're destroying us. Your husband destroyed himself. I'm simply revealing the destruction." Thursday morning, I was watering Maria's orchids when the phone rang again. Kayla's number. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "Scott hasn't slept in 3 days, she said without preamble. "He's lost 12 pounds. He sits at the kitchen table staring at those legal papers like they're written in another language. Perhaps he should have learned to read before signing mortgage documents." "Stop it!" The words exploded through the phone. "Just stop being so cruel. This isn't you, Dad. This isn't the man who raised me." I moved to my study and sat down at the desk where this had all begun. Maria's photograph watched me with gentle eyes. "This is exactly the man who raised you, Kayla. This is what happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness. What do you want from us?" "I want your husband to understand that actions have consequences. I want him to comprehend that calling someone worthless trash comes with a price." "He knows he was wrong." "Does he? Has he called to apologize? Has he acknowledged that his behavior was unacceptable?" Silence stretched between us. "He's too proud," she admitted finally. "Then he can be proud in someone else's house." "Dad, please, I'm begging you. This is only going to get worse, isn't it?" I looked out my window at the December sky, gray and promising snow. Winter was coming to Spokane, and Scott Martin was about to discover just how cold the world could become. "This is only the beginning, Kayla." Saturday morning, the doorbell rang while I was reading the business section. Through the window, I saw Scott's Honda in my driveway, the same car I'd helped him repair 3 years ago, with an $8,000 loan he'd never repaid. Scott stood on my porch looking like a man who'd aged 5 years and 5 days. His clothes hung loose, his face was drawn and unshaven, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who'd stopped sleeping. "Leonard, I need to talk to you." I opened the door wider and gestured toward my study. Scott followed like a condemned man walking to his execution. "Sit," I said, settling behind my desk while he remained standing. "I was wrong." The words came out cracked and broken. What I said at Thanksgiving was completely out of line. "You've been generous to our family for years, and I had no right to speak to you that way." I leaned back in my chair, saying nothing. "Leonard, I'm asking you to call off the lawyers and the bank. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever you want. But please, we can't lose our house. Kayla's falling apart, and Emma keeps asking why Mommy cries all the time. Do you understand your legal situation, Scott?" He swallowed hard. "I know you own part of our house, I never knew that. If I had, I never would have. What else do you understand? The bank wants $34,000 in 10 days. I don't have that kind of money. I don't have any money. His voice broke completely. I lost my job because I couldn't concentrate after your papers came. Everything's falling apart. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a legal pad, then began writing in careful block letters. Here are my terms for stopping the legal proceedings. Scott leaned forward eagerly. First, you will apologize publicly at Christmas dinner, in front of every family member who witnessed your behavior at Thanksgiving. Okay, yes. Second, you will acknowledge that you have been financially irresponsible and ungrateful for 12 years of support. His face reddened, but he nodded. Third, you will sign a written agreement never to ask me for financial assistance again. Leonard, that's... Fourth, you will state publicly that you called your wife's father worthless trash and that this was completely unacceptable. Scott stared at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. You want me to humiliate myself in front of everyone. I want you to tell the truth in front of everyone. This isn't about an apology. This is about you breaking me down completely. I set down my pen and looked at him directly. You had a choice at Thanksgiving dinner, Scott. You chose to humiliate me publicly. Now you have another choice. Scott stood up slowly, his hands shaking with either exhaustion or rage. I won't grovel. I won't destroy what's left of my dignity just to satisfy your need for revenge. Then you'll lose your house. Maybe, but I won't let you turn me into something pathetic. He walked to the door, then turned back. I was wrong to call you worthless trash, but right now, I'm not sure you're any better than I am. The front door closed behind him with quiet finality. I returned to my desk and pulled out James Connor's detective report. Scott still had some fight left in him, some pride to protect. Time to take that away too. Monday morning, I opened my address book to the section marked Professional Contacts. 35 years of business relationships spread across 12 pages of carefully maintained connections. Every IT manager, HR director, and business owner who'd ever benefited from my referrals or partnerships. I started with David Wells at Northwest Tech Solutions. David Leonard Green. I heard through business circles that Scott Martin might be approaching your company for employment. Scott Martin, let me check our applicant database. Papers shuffled in the background. Yes, he submitted a resume. Friday's strong technical background. I feel obligated to share some concerns. Scott was recently terminated for performance issues related to stress management. There are also questions about his financial responsibility and judgment under pressure. I appreciate the heads up, Leonard. We'll certainly take that into consideration. By noon, I'd made 8 similar calls. By Wednesday, Scott had been rejected by every major IT firm in Spokane. Thursday afternoon, Kayla called. Dad, something's wrong. Scott's been applying everywhere, but companies keep rejecting him after showing initial interest. It's like someone's warning them about him. I set down my coffee and considered my response carefully. The Spokane business community is quite interconnected, Kayla. Word travels quickly about employment concerns. Employment concerns? What kind of concerns? Scott's recent termination, his inability to handle pressure, the legal and financial issues he's currently facing. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You're doing this. You're sabotaging his job search. I'm providing accurate information to protect other businesses from making poor hiring decisions. How can you be so cruel? We need that income. Emma needs stability. Scott needed to accept my terms. He chose pride over practicality. You're destroying us systematically. I'm teaching your husband that actions have consequences. The line went quiet for a long moment. I won't let you do this to my family, she said finally. If you're going to wage war against my husband, then you're waging war against me too. Kayla, no, I'm done choosing between you and Scott. You've made it impossible. I choose him. The dial tone echoed in my study like a funeral bell. Friday morning brought the final piece. Richard Palmer called to confirm the debt collection lawsuit had been filed. Court date is January 15th. Scott will be required to appear and explain why he can't satisfy the debt obligations. Timeline for property seizure? If the court rules in our favor, which they will, we can initiate foreclosure proceedings within 30 days. I hung up and walked to my window. Across the street, my neighbor was hanging Christmas lights, preparing for a season of family gatherings and shared traditions. I'd lost my daughter, but Scott Martin would lose everything. Sometimes justice required sacrifice. Maria had taught me that, when she chose to fight her cancer rather than surrender to it. She'd lost the battle, but maintained her dignity until the end. Scott would have no such luxury. By Christmas, he would understand exactly what happened when someone called Leonard Green worthless trash. Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call. Martha's name appeared on my caller ID at 7:30, earlier than she'd ever called in 15 years. "Leonard, we need to talk about what you're doing to Scott and Kayla." I set down my coffee carefully. "Good morning to you too, Martha." "Don't give me your polite tone. Kayla called me crying yesterday. She says you're sabotaging Scott's job search through your business connections. I'm providing accurate employment references to protect other companies from poor hiring decisions. You're destroying that family systematically." Her voice rose with a fury I'd rarely heard from my sister. "Scott made a mistake at dinner. People say stupid things when they're stressed. But what you're doing is cruel and vindictive." Tuesday brought James, Scott's brother. "Leonard, I know Scott was out of line at Thanksgiving, but this has gone too far. He can't find work anywhere in Spokane. His family's going to lose their house. Scott should have considered those consequences before insulting me in my own home. You're punishing Kayla and Emma for something Scott did." Wednesday, Paul called. "I've known you for 30 years, Leonard. This isn't like you. Scott's admitted he was wrong. Isn't that enough? Has he apologized to me directly? He's too proud. Then he's not sorry enough." Thursday evening, Christina called, her voice shaking with emotion. "Mr. Green, I have daughters too. I can't imagine watching them suffer because of something their father said. Please, for Emma's sake, couldn't you just forgive Scott?" Each call felt like water wearing down stone. By Friday, I found myself staring out my study window longer than usual, watching neighbors prepare for Christmas while my own family prepared for war. Had I gone too far? The question crept into my thoughts during quiet moments. Scott's insult had lasted 30 seconds. My response had been 3 weeks of systematic destruction. But then I remembered his face that Thanksgiving evening, the sneer when he called me worthless trash, the satisfaction in his voice, as if he'd been wanting to say those words for years. Martha called again Saturday morning. "The family's having Christmas dinner at my house this year. Everyone will be there except you, unless you stop this madness." "You're choosing him over me?" "I'm choosing Kayla over your wounded pride." Sunday night, alone in my house decorated with Maria's ornaments, I pulled out James Connor's detective report, 11 pages of Scott's financial deception, his gambling addiction, his secret debt, his plans for bankruptcy that would destroy Kayla's credit and Emma's college fund. The family thought they knew the full story. They'd made Scott into a victim and me into a villain based on incomplete information. Christmas was 4 days away. Time for them to learn the truth about the man they were defending. I reached for my phone and dialed Martha's number. "Change of plans," I said when she answered. "I'll be coming to Christmas dinner after all, and I'm bringing some documents that might interest everyone." December 26th brought vindication in the form of Richard Palmer's phone call. "The court has expedited our hearing to January 15th. Judge Morrison reviewed the preliminary documents and sees no complexity in the case." I sat back in my leather chair, watching snow fall outside my study window. No complexity because Scott has no legal standing. Exactly. Co-ownership is clearly established, debt obligations are documented, and default is uncontested. This should be straightforward. January 15th arrived gray and cold. The Spokane County Courthouse felt appropriately solemn as Richard and I presented our case. Scott sat across the courtroom with a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Judge Morrison reviewed our documents with methodical precision. Property deeds, mortgage agreements, 12 years of payment records, bank statements showing Scott's financial irresponsibility. "Mr. Martin," the judge said finally, "do you dispute Mr. Green's co-ownership of the property at 1247 Miller Avenue?" Scott's voice was barely audible. "No, Your Honor." "Do you dispute your obligation to satisfy the outstanding debt of $34,000? "No, Your Honor." "Then this court orders immediate satisfaction of said debt or forfeiture of property rights. You have 30 days to vacate. 3 weeks later, I drove past Miller Avenue and saw the sheriff's cars in Scott's driveway. Moving trucks loaded furniture while deputies supervised the eviction. Scott carried boxes to his Honda with the mechanical movements of a broken man. Kayla stood on the front porch holding Emma's hand, both of them crying. That evening, my phone rang. "Dad?" Kayla's voice was small, uncertain. "I've been reading through the court documents. All those financial records." "Yes." "You supported us for 12 years. You paid for everything? The house down payment, Scott's car repairs, my surgery, Emma's school clothes, everything." I waited. "I had no idea how much you sacrificed for our family. I thought you were just being cruel because your feelings were hurt. And now? Now I understand that Scott and I have been living off your generosity this entire time, that we never actually owned that house, that without you, we'd have lost everything years ago. The silence stretched between us like a bridge being built one word at a time. I'm sorry, Dad. I chose Scott over you, and I was wrong. You weren't being vindictive. You were just stopping. You were just stopping the help we'd taken for granted." "Where are you living now?" "A 2-bedroom apartment on the south side. It's small, but it's what we can afford on my boutique salary. And Scott, he's broken. He sits in that apartment staring at the walls. I don't think he ever understood how much we depended on you until it was all gone." I looked at Maria's photograph on my desk. She'd always believed that truth had a way of revealing itself when people were ready to see it. "Kayla, there's something else you need to know about Scott, something that explains why his financial situation was even worse than you realized." "What do you mean?" "Come to dinner Sunday. Just you and Emma. There's one more document you need to see." Sunday afternoon, Kayla arrived at my front door with Emma's small hand in hers. My granddaughter had grown taller in the months since I'd seen her, her brown curls now reaching her shoulders like Maria's had when we first met. "Thank you for letting us come," Kayla said quietly. We sat in the living room, where Maria's piano still held family photographs from happier times. Emma played quietly with her coloring books, while Kayla and I talked like adults for the first time in years. "I've had 2 months to think about everything," she began. "The court documents, the financial records, all those years you supported us without us even realizing it." I nodded but remained silent. "Scott was wrong to call you worthless trash. I was wrong to support him against you. You weren't being vindictive. You were just stopping. You were just stopping the help we'd taken for granted. And now I understand that respect has to be mutual. That family doesn't mean Scott can insult you without consequences." Emma looked up from her coloring. "Grandpa, why doesn't Daddy live with us anymore?" The innocence in her question made the room suddenly heavy. "Your daddy made some poor choices, sweetheart," I said gently. "Sometimes adults have to face consequences for their actions." After Emma returned to her drawings, I walked to my study and retrieved James Connor's detective report, the same 11 pages that had waited months for the right moment. "There's something else you need to know about Scott's financial problems," I said, returning to the living room. Kayla looked up expectantly. "Your husband has a gambling addiction. He's been gambling online for over 2 years, $28,000 in losses, hidden from you completely." Her face went pale. "That's impossible." I handed her the report. Secret bank account, multiple gambling websites, daily sessions while you thought he was working late. As she read, her expression shifted from disbelief to horror to something approaching relief. "This explains everything," she whispered. "The mood swings, the secrecy about money, the way he got defensive when I asked about our finances. He was planning to declare bankruptcy and destroy your credit rating to cover his debts." Kayla set down the report and looked at me with eyes that reminded me so much of Maria's. "You knew all along. You could have told me months ago and ended this quickly. You needed to learn the truth gradually, to understand the full scope of what happened, not just react to shocking news. So, all of this, the legal action, the business contacts, forcing him to lose everything, it wasn't just about him calling you worthless trash. It was about teaching both of you that actions have consequences, that respect matters, that financial responsibility matters, that honesty matters." Emma looked up again. "Are you and Mommy friends now?" I reached over and smoothed her curls. "We're family, Emma, and family forgives each other when they make mistakes." Kayla's eyes filled with tears. "Can you forgive me, Dad?" "I already have, but things will be different now. We'll rebuild our relationship on mutual respect and honesty. And Scott has learned that calling someone worthless trash carries a very expensive price tag. Through the window, I could see spring arriving in Spokane, new growth replacing what winter had taken away. Maria would have been proud. I'd protected our daughter, taught her important lessons, and maintained my dignity throughout. Justice had been served with precision and patience. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone face the full consequences of their own choices. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.